some help here. There's Haley down here. I'll be right back. I gotta do it. Pardon me. Excuse me. Pardon me. Sorry. Pardon me. Sorry. Hello. Oh, Haley. Hey. I don't know where. Good. The aspect, yeah. Thanks. Great. All right. Okay, well, I can try my computer if that's what we need to do. Hi, nice to see you. I know who you are.
I'm going on the trip with you.
Oh, this will be good fun. I'm looking forward to it.
So I have to run something by you.
Okay. Yeah, catch me in this moment. Should be good fun, I think. Yeah.
I'll ask you later.
Yes, please. Thank you. If you have permission on Chelsea's, can you share it with me? If you have permission on... Oh, you can't share it? No, we're having an aspect issue. Yeah, Chelsea.
When I was testing it,
Yeah.
it was fine, but I was using a different laptop to test it.
Have you fixed the aspect? Huh.
It's where it's recommended.
Okay. So here's my... I would like Dana or somebody to share Chelsea's with me to see if I can get it off of here. Right. So long as this one will...
I have a feeling it's the projector.
Okay.
Because it was working earlier. Yeah. And that was a different laptop.
Oh, haha. We might be good. We might be good. That's the full width of it.
Yeah. This is a smaller.
But it's the full width of it. Great. All right. Thank you. So helpful. I do. So, as soon as you get up, I'm about to call people to order. And then also. All right. Thanks. Hello. Pardon me, I'm on your left. Hello. Nice to see you. Okay. Marvelous. Thank you.
Ready to start.
Yes. As soon as she's up there, I'm ready to turn the microphone on. Okay. Testing my microphone here. If we can take our seats, I would appreciate that. We're going to get started. Good evening, everyone. We have a quorum, so we're going to open now our 2025 annual meeting of the Swedenborg Foundation. My name is Chris Barber, and I am the Vice President of the board. Our board president, Robert Carr, seen here, he sends his regrets this evening. Travel problems with Newark Airport this week meant that he is attending tonight's meeting remotely from San Francisco. The honor then falls to me to deliver his report to you this evening. The Swedenborg Foundation was founded in New York City in 1849 as the American Swedenborg Printing and Publishing Society. That means this is the 175th annual meeting of this institution. And it's a privilege to share an update of the Foundation's accomplishments in 2024 as we also look forward to furthering our mission. You'll note on the screen here that you can access the 2024 annual report via the QR code that is on the screen. So if you'd like, you can do that with your cell phones. I'll leave it up there for a moment while you get yourself situated with that. In a world that is seeking deeper meaning and spiritual insight, Swedenborg's writings offer a rich, transformative perspective on faith, the human soul, and our relationship with the divine. Through our programs and publications and outreach initiatives, we create opportunities for individuals from all walks of life to explore these insights in a thoughtful and an engaging way. Whether through participation or donations or sharing our mission with others, your support strengthens our ability to reach new audiences and deepen our collective understanding of these powerful works. 2024 was a very productive year for our publishing operations, continuing the Foundation's 175 years of using print media. Did I say print media? Let me amend that to be the written word. Because as you can see from the inclusion of the smartphone, it's important to note that in this modern digital era, we make books available for free as PDF downloads, allowing anyone around the world to access Swedenborg's writings on smartphones, tablets, and computers. It's worth noting that our free PDF downloads represent a huge part of our mission fulfillment. In 2024, we recorded 45,814 free downloads, with 7,121 of those being New Century Edition titles. Sticking with our subject of the written word, here's a recap of our 2024 and 2025 publishing hopes. Our work on the New Century Edition translation of Swedenborg's writings progressed with the publication of volumes 7 and 8 of Secrets of Heaven. And we're making good progress on Secrets of Heaven. In fact, we are on track to publish the final volume of the portable edition of Swedenborg's magnum opus in 2026. In addition, oh yes. In addition, we pushed work forward on further translation and preparation on the deluxe editions. In addition to that New Century Edition work, in 2024 we published several exciting new titles. One of them, called Surviving Suicidal Ideation, has been one of our best-selling print titles. Internally within the Foundation, we convened a formal editorial committee, which is staffed with experts, that will guide our selection of new titles according to a thoughtfully defined set of criteria that advances our mission to get works of high quality on people's shelves and into their e-readers. Here you can see our top 5 print books and top 5 ebooks. You can find this on page 6 of the annual report. You can also find unit sales of audiobooks on that same page. Turning now to the subject of new media. 2024 saw innovation and new levels of success and outreach for the Swedenborg Foundation's programming initiatives. We produced 97 long-form videos and 226 shorts, with many shorts consistently surpassing 10,000 organic views. Now, organic views means that the viewership wasn't amplified by extra advertising. The primary home for Off the Left Eye is YouTube, which is a constantly evolving site. And this means that we need to constantly experiment and evolve ourselves in order to reach as many viewers as possible. We're seeing increased viewership on our TikTok as well, so if you have that app, look us up. We launched a long-form podcast, which is featuring Curtis Childs and Dr. Jonathan Rose, consisting of in-depth conversation on topics from Swedenborg's writings lasting 1.5 hours. These videos, in a world of short-form content, have been very popular, regularly eclipsing 20,000 views, including one viral episode that has well over 200,000 views. The Swedenborg Foundation's mission has always focused on illuminating and sharing Emanuel Swedenborg's spiritual insights, making them accessible to those seeking deeper meaning, connection, and personal growth. We took an inspiring step forward in 2024 as the Foundation embraced innovative technologies to amplify its reach while staying true to its core purpose. Our social media growth gives cause for celebration, with impressions nearly doubling, interactions significantly increasing, and video views reaching new record levels. Just today, the staff and the board assembled for a retreat where we discussed our progress and future, and we were reminded that there are so many other videos and sites that could easily take our viewers' attention and time. It's meaningful, and it's a testament to our Foundation's efforts and the value of Swedenborg's writings that they continue to choose to spend that time with us. A glimpse of the Foundation's meaningful impact can be found on page 8 of the annual report, where you'll find testimonials that we hope you'll read and feel proud to have helped make possible. The board and the staff spend considerable time and effort also in managing our finances. Approximately 70% of our overall spending goes into program-related expenses. A more detailed breakdown by program of our expenses is available in the Statement of Functional Expenses chart on page 12 of the annual report. The board works closely with Foundation staff to be wise and effective stewards of our resources, with a constant eye towards how we can best further our mission to spread awareness and use of Swedenborg's writings. Since 2014, the Swedenborg Foundation has entrusted over 90% of its endowment to professional investment managers. These funds have been invested in a diversified portfolio of cost-efficient index funds. Looking ahead, The Internal Affairs Committee will continue working diligently in 2025 to ensure the Foundation's financial sustainability. These efforts are central to supporting our mission and securing the resources needed to advance the work of the Swedenborg Foundation for years to come. Our community membership platform saw over 147 different activities during the course of this year. Activities included live Q&A shows, book discussion groups, community chats, online courses, the Swedenborg Speaker Series presentations. Some highlights from the Swedenborg Speaker Series can be found described on page 15 of the report. I'm giving y'all homework. As we reflect on our work in 2024 and on the road ahead, I'm filled with gratitude for this community and the shared passion that unites our membership. Thank you for being a part of this journey. We couldn't do it without you. Our donors and community members, our readers and our viewers, our staff, and the board. It's your generosity with your time and effort, donations, your trust and support that makes all of this possible. For that, we and the countless lives that are touched by the Swedenborg Foundation's work offer our heartfelt and enduring thanks. Thank you to the membership. We would also like to take a moment here to express our thanks to our outgoing board members, Dylan Hendricks, Devin Zuber, Bergen Youngie, and Pete Toot, for their service and the talent and passion that they have brought to the foundation. Thank you very much for your service. You'll note, if you have been scrolling the annual report, that we also pay special tribute and honor to one of our members, Pete Toot, for his extraordinary service on the Swedenborg Foundation's Board of Directors. Pete Toot, sitting right here. Can we give a round of applause for Pete? For 18 years, 13 of those as board secretary, Pete offered the foundation his blend of technical insight, spiritual dedication, and compassionate leadership. As his beautiful painting, here done on the screen, shows, Pete's talents are considerable and span many areas. Chairing numerous committees, including operations, bylaws, governance, nominating committee, external affairs, and development, Pete brought clarity, order, and commitment to every facet of board service. His presence provided steady guidance through times of change and growth, and his voice, his deep institutional memory, and his inquisitive spirit, always looking to learn, often reminded us of our greater spiritual purpose. We wish Pete smooth seas and following winds. Thank you again. And now, I would like us to look to the future of the board of the Swedenborg Foundation. And for that, I'll invite to the podium Eli Eccles, the chair of the Foundation's Governance Committee and Nominating Committee. Join me in welcoming Eli. Thank you so much, Eli, for managing that. Really appreciate it. This was our first year of using our new online voting system. Sped things up and keeps us accountable. So thank you so much for participating in that. And I thank you again for being here this evening. It is time now for me to introduce our speakers. And it really does give me great pleasure to introduce Jonathan and Chelsea here, who are co-authors with Robert Falconer of our new book, Opening the Inner World, Spiritual Healing, Internal Family Systems, and Emanuel Swedenborg. I invite you up to the stage. Thank you.
Yes, I would. Thank you. Oh, can you change it up for me? That's great. So, Swedenborg meet internal family systems, and internal family systems meet Swedenborg. That's what we're doing tonight, and with this book is formally introducing these two bodies of work, really. And so also tonight is kind of a book launch event and celebration, because Opening the Inner World, my copy's here, is technically being published on May 22nd, so this week, but we have them here for sale and at a special discount for being here in person. So I welcome you to come up to this table in the front where we have this book as well as others for sale tonight, also at a discount after this talk. So Jonathan and I are co-presenting this talk, and Jonathan's going to open it up for us, and then I will speak for a good bit, and then we'll have some time for Q&A or reflections at the end. So that's the plan, and I will hand it over to you.
Thank you.
Jonathan.
Aren't we human beings strange creatures? Sure, other people outside ourselves are weird and baffling, but our own selves are baffling too. Have you ever made, to pick a trite example, a New Year's resolution and really intended to keep it, only to see a new habit fall into disrepair in about 3 weeks? Or have you had the experience of promising yourself or someone else you wouldn't eat or drink this or that at a party you were about to go to, and then when you're at the party, watching in horror as your hand reaches out to do exactly that? Or have you ever said yes to an invite and really wanted to go, but then when you arrived, your body felt very uncomfortable, your throat closed, and nothing in you wanted to be there anymore? Or have you ever been halfway through a rant on some subject and suddenly thought, what am I saying? Why am I so adamant about this? If we carefully observe ourselves and our own thoughts and behaviors, something Swedenborg referred to as self-examination, at one moment we may see ourselves tell a room full of people that we would never do X, Y, or Z, and then to our embarrassment, within an hour and a half in a different setting, find ourselves doing, or at least think of doing, exactly X, Y, or Z. Or telling people we're pretty relaxed about this or that issue, and then find ourselves later that day getting very vexed about the thing we said we were so relaxed about. And Curtis Childs on Off the Left Eye has talked about head bullies, the strange phenomenon that we seemingly criticize and even trash talk ourselves more or less constantly in a way that would be intolerable if someone else followed us around and said that all day. Why, when we're going for a job interview, would we tell ourselves over and over again that we'll never get the job and that we're not that good? People talk about having an evil twin, or waking up and choosing violence. Something similar used to be pictured as a devil and an angel on our shoulders giving us conflicting advice. Paul in the New Testament even talks about our being at war with ourselves. My point is that we are mysterious creatures having a mysterious experience of life in this world. And if we pay attention to ourselves, we may find contradictions. How could those be explained? Emanuel Swedenborg is known for his theology, but along the way he has a lot to say about psychology as well. In fact, that seems to have been a driving interest since early in his life. Here's a passage from Divine Providence in which Swedenborg is arguing that we have completely separate levels of inner and outer thought. To make his case, he uses fairly extreme examples: hypocrisy and fraud. Quote, "To see that everyone who is old enough has an outer and an inner thinking, or outer and inner levels of spirit that amount to outer and inner levels of self, we need only look closely at the thoughts and intentions of other people on the basis of what they say and do. We may also look at our own thoughts and intentions when we're in company and when we're by ourselves. People can talk cordially with others on the basis of their outer thinking and yet be hostile to them in their inner thinking. They can talk about love for their neighbor and love for God on the basis of their outer thinking and do so with feeling, when in their inner thinking they are trivializing their neighbor and have no fear of God. People can talk thoughtfully and with feeling about the justice of our civil laws, the virtues of moral living, and the theological issues of spiritual life. And yet when they're by themselves, moved by their inner thinking and its feeling, they can argue against civil laws, against the virtues of moral living, and against the theological issues of spiritual life. We do this when we're driven by our compulsions to evil, but want it to seem to the world that we're not." And then Swedenborg goes on to give another example. When they're listening to what others say, many people are thinking, are their private thoughts the same as the thoughts that they're expressing? Should I believe them or not? What are their intentions? Everyone knows that flatterers and hypocrites have two levels of thought. They can control themselves and prevent their inner thinking from being seen, hiding it deeper and deeper within, and virtually locking the doors to keep it hidden. And then Swedenborg gives yet another example. We can also see quite clearly that we have inner and outer levels of thinking from the fact that we can see our own outer thought from the vantage point of our inner thought. That's Divine Providence 104. So this is saying that we each have multiple levels within ourselves, and they can be quite opposite to each other. Swedenborg even takes it further and says that every thought and feeling we have is in a complete human form. He seems to acknowledge that this will be hard to comprehend for most people, but says it nonetheless because it's true and therefore needs to be said. This is a quote from Heaven and Hell. "I would like to offer a secret no one has ever known before, namely that everything good and true that comes from the Lord and makes heaven is in the human form. This is true not only of the greatest whole, but also of every least part. This form influences everyone who accepts what is good and true from the Lord, and causes everyone in heaven to be in a human form according to that acceptance. This is why heaven is consistent with itself in general and in particular, why the human form is the form of the whole, of each community, and of each angel. I need to add here," Swedenborg says, "that this is also the form of the details of thought that come from heavenly love in angels." Heaven and Hell 460. So even individual details of thought from heavenly love are in the human form, whatever that means. When I first encountered this passage, I wondered a great deal what good it could possibly do to know that our thoughts and feelings are in individual human forms. What does that even mean? Well, stick around. Swedenborg says that these different parts of us, each of which is human, act like a household with a manager and even have a degree of autonomy in relation to each other. This is a quote from Secrets of Heaven. "Our earthly self as it relates to our reasoning self, or our outward self as it relates to our inward, resembles the manager of a household. Everything in us works the way a single household does. In other words, the way a single family does. There is the part that functions as the head of the household and the parts that function as servants. The rational mind itself is what oversees everything as the head of the household and organizes the earthly mind by exerting an influence on it. The earthly mind is what carries out and administers orders. The earthly mind is distinct from the reasoning mind and occupies a lower level, but also acts with some autonomy. So by comparison, it is called the elder servant of the household, the biblical phrase that Swedenborg is explaining there in Secrets of Heaven 3020. This is fascinating to me because it aligns really well with a relatively new form of therapy, internal family systems therapy, or IFS. IFS, as far as I understand, grew out of family systems theory, a realization that people play certain roles in their families, and trying to do therapy on one individual without considering their place in their family can run into roadblocks. IFS takes that a step further and says there are multiple parts within each of us, and they too function like a family. And isn't that exactly what Swedenborg just said? Like a family. Amazing. IFS is now becoming known as an unusually effective way to deal with some of the most difficult issues facing the human race, such as trauma, addiction, extreme anxiety, suicidal feelings, and so on. IFS came to its view of the mind in an interesting way by actually setting aside theories and simply asking clients questions and listening open-mindedly to their answers. And what people were telling them was that there were different parts active in themselves at different times. The reason a client could smile and nod during a therapy session at sage advice about avoiding certain behaviors and then go out and do exactly those behaviors again is because different parts of themselves are active at different times. Some parts are dominant during therapy, but another part takes over when they leave the office and encounter some real-life situation. A few decades ago, the idea of multiple personalities in one person became familiar, but was associated only with severe mental illness occasioned by extreme trauma and abuse. But IFS discovered the same thing Swedenborg had said centuries ago, that we all have multiple parts of ourselves. This is actually the human design. And this helps explain the examples I started with, why we have trouble keeping resolutions, or we surprise ourselves, or we struggle with addictive behaviors, and why, for better or for worse, we can ponder and question and criticize ourselves. Good news, the same multiplicity that can make us so baffling to ourselves and others can also lead to healing. Over to you, Chelsea.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. So is my mic is on, great. So, I've had some low points in my life, as I imagine you have too. And some of you may be familiar with a spoken word poem I wrote and shared many years ago on YouTube and locally here called Ode to My Shoulders. It was written from the recognition that I had spent many years of my life dissociated from my body, in large part from facing the death of my mother at 10 years old. I became accustomed to a baseline of not feeling present, existing only as a shell of myself, which you can imagine had many negative impacts in my life. But life, the divine, of whatever name you like, has a habit of waking us up to the places where we've been shut down inside, where the blood supply has been cut off. And it's painful to wake up, like a limb tingling as it recovers from having fallen asleep. But if I may be so bold as to ascribe an agenda to the divine, it is our healing to lead us toward wholeness. And this wholeness, as Swedenborg puts it, involves us actually growing in a sense of ourselves, a sense of self that has been, quote, brought to life by the Lord, unquote. Or as he says in one of my favorite places, Secrets of Heaven 63, the Lord does not rest until love takes the lead. I wrote the ode poem from a place of deep gratitude and this new recognition for the work of the fibers of my trapezius muscles, which had unceasingly, with relentless dedication, held me up when there was no one inside. Somehow they knew, as I say in the poem, love never stops holding us. They knew there was a truer form, a spirit destined to take up formal residence in this body house again. As it turns out, healing is in fact a journey into our bodies, whether we like it or not. Our body is a portal through which we can connect to the parts of us that have been cut off from love. Swedenborg describes this process as opening to the inflow of divine love and wisdom into our inner self, which flows all the way down to our outermost parts. These two, he says in soul-body interaction, which we have some for sale here, spiritual warmth and spiritual light, or love and wisdom, flow together from God into the human soul, flow through our soul into our mind and its feelings and thoughts, and flow from there into our physical senses, speech, and actions. A number of years after I wrote Ode to My Shoulders, the thaw of my softening to love, to let love lead, continued. Mindfulness practices like metta, which is a self-compassion meditation, introduced me to the possibility of actively extending compassion toward myself. I had a developing sense of an inward dimensionality. I could conjure a sensually rich, safe space in my imagination, and it would help the anxiety that riddled my body to lessen. But as I intuited in my poem, even though I had written it so many years before, my shoulders seemed to act on their own initiative for the sake of my welfare, and annoyingly against the will of another prominent part of myself that disdained the anxious tension. This seemed like an impossible knot of combative states or reactivity that would often result in a large cloud of overwhelm. But throughout this time, being baffled by those waves, something else was coming online in me, re-entering my consciousness, flowing in and taking up residence in this body house again. A sense of self that had been brought to life by the Lord had softened and opened to the inflow of love. So my system was primed for being introduced to the internal family systems model. For a few years, I had heard the name and honestly dismissed it as sounding overly technical and out of touch. You can't count the number of times I say IFS, they're like, what does that stand for? Internal Family Systems. Well, it sounds really great, like a warm hug, but it's not exactly what you think. So it was only later that my interest was piqued when a therapist I was seeing reflected back to me that I was talking about myself in terms of parts and offered that we could use this model to get to know them directly. It became a watershed moment in my life. My inner world had gone from being one-dimensional, at the mercy of my overwhelming feelings, kind of like that, to two-dimensional, being able to extend compassion toward myself. But then finally to three-dimensional, as weird as that might sound, through developing rich inner relationships with my parts. Myself, from love, could be present to not only my anxious parts, who held my shoulders like the steel cables of the Verrazzano Bridge, but also to the exhausted one who just wished I could relax. And even the part of me that actually knew how to suck myself out of my body in the first place, to not have to feel or face any of it. After finding IFS, I couldn't help but wonder who in the IFS world knew of Swedenborg, because the two were so aligned, as you started to hear from Jonathan, and the parallels were uncanny, like that quote about the household and the inner family. IFS therapist and author Robert Falconer, in 2023, came out with his amazing work, The Others Within Us, and I'll read you the subtitle, Internal Family Systems, Porous Mind, and Spirit Possession. That year, I learned of the book through a video Bob shared, which included a demonstration of a session with a client experiencing what IFS calls an unattached burden, or UB. And the characteristics of UBs match the description of evil spirits in Swedenborg's experiences. The way he navigated interacting with the UB in the client's system, and finally encouraging it of its own free will to leave her system, made me exceptionally curious as to whether Bob had heard of Swedenborg. So I did two things right away. I ordered the book, and I reached out to Bob through the contact form on his website. To my delight, he was willing to meet, and within the first or second virtual visit we had, I couldn't help myself but say that I had this desire to create a book about IFS and Swedenborg. And it turns out Bob is a student of Swedenborg's, and was delighted to build a new connection with us. And so there's a section in his book about Swedenborg, as well as one about the psychologist Wilson Van Dusen. He's also friends with Reverend Rachel Rivers in California and a few other Swedenborgians, but still considers himself very new to Swedenborg's works. He was enthusiastic about my proposal and suggested we base the book on recorded conversations. So this gave me the idea to include Jonathan Rose. This way, we would have Bob as an IFS expert, teacher, and therapist, Jonathan as a Swedenborg scholar and translator, and myself as a bridge between both worlds, a lifelong student of Swedenborg's thought, and by this point also a trained IFS practitioner, which I'm very happy about. Bob and Jonathan hadn't met before the start of our conversations, so it felt risky but exhilarating to see what would happen and capture these two worlds meeting in real time through Bob and Jonathan. We had 9 two-hour recorded conversations. There's a little taste of all of those videos. And which I transcribed and edited into the book. We had the choice whether to edit the material into a single voice, like I didn't know how we might go about this, but then I ended up landing on that we thought it best to retain our distinct voices. And so this was very intentional that the book invites the reader into the conversation. So the work, though, is organized topically, and there we go, that's a page spread from the book, and includes an introduction to both IFS and Swedenborg, so whether you're new to either one, before exploring what these two perspectives offer each other. It also includes a thorough bibliography and a comprehensive index created by the Swedenborg Foundation's metadata specialist, Ray Schneider. Bob says in the introduction, "The exciting thing to me that we are doing in this book is presenting Swedenborg with a lens from way over here, and modern psychotherapy and the modern psychotherapy world in a language from way over here, and seeing how they're reflecting the same underlying reality. As we sort through the language, the underlying reality gets clearer. Something with light shown on it from 2 directions. You can see all the details a whole lot better." So I'm going to take us through each of the terms in the subtitle in sequence, and then we'll explore what I see as a few of the key exciting parallels between these two worlds. So first, spiritual healing. We assert in the book that psychological healing is inherently spiritual. The spiritual level in us is a largely untapped resource to support health and well-being. And as Bob says, he thinks Swedenborg is the person who can re-spiritualize Western psychotherapy. So internal family systems. It's an empirically developed psychotherapeutic model and paradigm, which is, by definition, both spiritual and body-centered. It was initially developed by Dr. Richard Schwartz, who you saw in a picture earlier, in the 1980s, and has grown in perspective and widespread adoption over the years since. I thought I'd just quote from the IFS Institute website to have you hear how they describe it directly. IFS conceives of every human being as a system of inner parts led by a core self. We believe the mind is naturally multiple, and that is a good thing. Just like members of a family, inner parts are forced from their valuable states into extreme roles within us. Self is in everyone. It can't be damaged. It knows how to heal. IFS is frequently used as an evidence-based psychotherapy, helping people heal by accessing and healing their protective and wounded inner parts. IFS creates inner and outer connectedness by helping people first access their self, and from that core, come to understand and heal their parts. Within the IFS model, parts are innate to us. Each part has its own perspective, interests, memories, viewpoints, and every part of us has a positive intent, even if its actions are counterproductive or cause dysfunction. Quoting again from the book, Bob says, "Parts are what populate our inner world. They're real beings with full personalities and good intentions for the system. Parts can communicate with us, oftentimes through our bodies." So, now moving on to Emanuel Swedenborg. Swedenborg writes how we are each microcosms of heaven with levels in our minds. He describes our inner and outer self and the process of our regeneration, which involves, as I said, opening our inner self, which he also calls our rational mind, to the inflow of divine love and wisdom, and then eventually, if we're willing, allowing our outer self, or what he also calls our earthly mind, to become aligned with and led by our inner self. This is from Secrets of Heaven 3286. The main thing on which the work of regeneration hinges is the effort to bring our earthly self into correspondence with our rational self, not only as a whole, but also in particular. And it is through our rationality that the Lord reduces our earthly self into correspondence. His method is to instill goodness into our rational mind, plant seeds of truth in the soil of that goodness, and then through rational truth, reduce the earthly plane to obedience. When it obeys, it corresponds, and the more it corresponds, the more we are reborn. That describes a developing alignment between our outer and inner self. But where is Swedenborg's multiplicity? Jonathan was describing that earlier, and you heard, Swedenborg does write using the word parts of us, and levels, and selves. But there's one other key term, which is vessels. So this is from Secrets of Heaven 33:18. Great. A few words are needed to show how matters stand here, specifically how they stand with human beings. A human being is nothing else but an organ or vessel that receives life from the Lord. We do not live on our own. The life that flows into us from the Lord comes from his divine love. This love, or the life that radiates from it, flows in and bestows itself on the vessels in our rational and earthly minds. Such vessels in us face away from the life force because of the evil we inherit by birth and the evil we ourselves acquire by committing it. However, so far as it can do so, the inflowing life repositions the vessels to receive itself. And as Jonathan mentioned earlier, those vessels are in the human form. Swedenborg says in Secrets of Heaven 19:10, something that appears like a soul and a body exists in every facet of our being, in every facet of our feelings, and in every facet of our thinking. So I don't know about you, but the term vessel, and even that whole quote earlier about vessels from Swedenborg, just can seem sort of like, thanks. Like, why do I need to know that? And the term vessel can just seem so inanimate, like I've got a bunch of pots inside of myself. But when you put all the pieces of what Swedenborg is describing together, the truth is, these vessels are parts of our identity. We experience all the parts of us as us. From that I'm doing this, I don't want to go do that. That's a vessel. That's a part of us. Swedenborg emphasizes the importance of reflection, our ability to reflect upon ourselves. This is possible because of this dimension within us. And through that, we can have conversations with all the parts of ourselves. So you notice yourself doing a thing you don't want to do. Through IFS in particular, you can build a relationship with that part, and it can connect with you in a way that actually shifts the whole dynamic. So, I want to go through 3 notable parallels. First, and this is huge to me, that you can go inside and do work in the spiritual world, in yourself. So in IFS, you invite parts to, a word they use is unblend, and you make it safe for them to feel willing to unblend. And that, when they unblend, that really means they make inner space within yourself. And then there's a space between you and the part, and you can have a dialogue with that part from your core self, as IFS calls it, with a capital S, or as we make the connection in our book, that's like the inflow of your inner self into that rational level of your mind. The amazing thing when you do this work in IFS is that your inner experience abides by the laws of the spiritual world as described by Swedenborg. So for example, that love organizes everything, that everything is correspondential or has a representation, such that light is wisdom and heat is love, or if somebody's in a dark underground space and then they come out into the light and feel full of love. It's also a practical application of our inner senses, which Swedenborg describes. You can sense parts with inner sight, hearing, touch. Our inner senses give us insight into the spiritual state of a part. When you see a part from self, from your inner self that is open to that inflow, then self has this innate perception and knowing and understanding about the condition of the part, and it can help the part to unburden beliefs and feelings that no longer serve it. And so it's the nature of the divine inflow into our inner self that gives it these abilities. And it's innate in us to do this. So the second one is entering this inner world through sensory awareness of the body. So if you've ever spent any length of time with Swedenborg, you know that he makes a consistent practice of orienting to the influence of spirits by means of where and how they are connected to his body. You know, he'll say, the spirit was talking through my left ear, or my right knee hurt, or it was underneath me to the left. And one of the key ways that the internal family systems model has learned to connect with parts is by asking, where do you notice this part in or around your body? And then you can focus on it, and that's where the relationship starts. So our body is a map for interacting with our parts. And I think you can start to notice, is it open to heaven, or is it sort of burdened by something and that's cutting itself off from the influence of heaven? And so this becomes incredibly useful practically because the sensation of a state of being in your body can serve as a trailhead for getting to know the part or parts connected to that sensation. Like me noticing my shoulders are always so tight. What's going on there? And actually bring curiosity to get to know that. And this connects with the third one that I wanted to mention, which is about sensing divine inflow, with, again, emphasis on that word sensing. IFS, as it's mentioned about this core self that it describes, it uses the analogy of how photons can be both a particle and a wave. And they use that as an analogy for describing self, that self can be a localized, embodied presence, and a vast universal force that they call self-energy. And so just as you can get to know a part through your body, you can feel your self-energy and the inflow too. And how IFS has framed this is they've identified what they consider 8 core qualities of self-energy, or self, and they call them the 8 C's, just for ease of, remembering. There they are. Confidence, calm, compassion, courage, creativity, clarity, curiosity, and connectedness. And the amazing thing about these qualities is that they found it doesn't matter how traumatized, how disorganized of an attachment somebody has, how far away it feels and impossible it feels, everybody, if their parts are willing to unblend, these qualities of self just show up in people and start taking over in a healing journey. And Swedenborg says in Soul Body Interaction number 11, the body receives the living energies that flow through the soul from God. So your body is receiving these living energies. And that's what's amazing is that's not just a statement, you can feel it. And you can practice noticing the difference between feeling it and not feeling it. So, as I said, IFS has learned that when parts unblend, they're willing to make space. Self becomes present with all the qualities of the 8 C's. And so, self is very much aligned with what Swedenborg describes of this place where the Lord, where this divine energy connects to us that is never damaged, can never be put out, or discarded entirely. It's always there in everybody. And so IFS operationalizes what Swedenborg describes. Here you have, in a contemporary empirical healing modality, affirming what Swedenborg experienced, and then Swedenborg expands and deepens the IFS framework. Swedenborg offers a self-consistent, congruent explanation for why and how IFS works. And the amazing thing to me about that is that it comes from Swedenborg's own direct experience of studying and writing down for us, I felt it here, I felt it there, they were here and then they left. And so like Bob said that I quoted earlier, these two touch, IFS and Swedenborg touch into the same underlying reality, and when we look at both, we can get a deeper, clearer sense of what that underlying reality is. So, I want to invite you, let me see if I have anything else. Okay. If you're willing, to just take a few deep breaths right now. Just for a little while until I'm done talking. And I invite you to notice your body in your chair. And just as you're breathing deeply, just notice what you notice. You can scan your body for what IFS describes as trailheads. It might be a point of tension or a certain pain, stiffness, congestion. And even then, it might be a physical thing, but there might be a part that feels sort of like, I wish I didn't feel this way. Or even you might notice any agitation in your mind, or dullness, sleepiness, anything that grabs your attention. And then as you're breathing, just see if your attention wants to settle on one of those. And just go ahead and begin to gently focus on it. That place in your body or mind as you breathe deeply. As you notice it, see if you can help it notice you. Help it notice that it's not alone. You are here observing it. And if it feels possible, and don't force anything, but if it feels possible, you could see about sending a loving energy to that place. Or maybe some comforting words, or breathing into it. However it feels right, you can help the part know it's not alone, that it's loved, and that it can relax. And it may or may not relax, and that's okay. If it doesn't shift, it just means it needs more attention before it can relax. But for now, you can stay with it and be with that part as I, on behalf of my parts, recite to you my poem, Ode to My Shoulders. I love my life, but my shoulders betray me. At least that's what I've long believed. I've tried in vain to release their tension. They remain stubborn and resolute. Relax your shoulders, my dance teacher would say, in the peaking pitch of her Australian accent. And here I am, 2 decades later, finally acknowledging I can't. Who knew the tiny structures of each trapezius would ratchet close together, their finest threads hugging in to hold on tight when she was taken? As if they knew in that very moment that they would have to take over, and so sweetly volunteered the job of picking me up. They were willing to love me like a mother while I looked on their care with disdain. The truth is, my body loved me when I couldn't do the same. They didn't care that it would take decades for my mind to catch up, to finally realize love never stops holding us. But somehow they knew and never gave up. Their steadfast hold I felt as a burden, their tightness as betrayal. But they did not hold it against me. They simply held and held on tight. Despite the emptiness, they held a hope in me and carried me through the night. So I'd like to thank my shoulders who wouldn't settle for my lies. It's okay, I'm really happy, no matter how hard I tried. They knew there was a truer form, a spirit destined to take up formal residence in this body house again. I awoke just the other morning with a foreign sense of belonging. Only with being back did I realize how long I'd been gone. I felt a peace not unlike forgiveness as I lay with them in bed and said wordlessly to my shoulders, "Oh, now I understand. All these years I'm so sorry. I am back now. I am back." Thank you. And I just want to note, before we open it up for some discussion or questions or feedback or comments, I don't know what time it is, or maybe that is a working clock. This is a new offering from the Swedenborg Foundation, the Inflow Retreat, which I am facilitating in August 8th to 10th in a place called Phillipsburg, New Jersey, where it is the Harmony Mountain House, so a venue for spiritual retreats. And it is inspired by and brings to life, down into practices, the content of the Opening the Inner World book. So it uses some IFS, easy to learn IFS kind of practices, but is really about taking Swedenborg's ideas of inflow and getting to connect with your senses, like I said, to the reality of this in a safe container in community. It'll be a small retreat. There's limited space with private and shared accommodations. And I just want to note again that the book Soul-Body Interaction by Swedenborg is just like 10 numbers or something, like super short, but it's all about this inflow. And it's just an amazing digest, especially when you take it in connection with what I described with IFS. So the inflow retreat, you can find it on the Swedenborg Foundation website. If you want to register, registration is open. And yes, so now for some discussion. We'll get this other mic. Thank you, everybody. Anybody has any thoughts or anything? Chris.
We'll see. This was
Yeah,
funny earlier.
I know it was.
I'm testing this microphone. Hello? This one's not working. Hello? Okay.
Do you want me to take this off? You can.
I'm thinking of John 17. And, thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm thinking of John 17 at the opening where the heading in the New King James is Jesus prays for himself. Jesus spoke these words, lifted up his eyes to heaven and said, Father, the hour has come. Glorify your Son, that your Son also may glorify you, as you have given him authority over all flesh, that he should give eternal life to as many as you have given him. And it goes on with this Father-Son imagery, and I'm just thinking about this is Jesus talking to himself. This is the Lord talking to himself, having this kind of reflection, and it's got me wondering: did you, if you didn't, what thoughts do you have now? Did you consider the Trinity and how the doctrines talk about that, and how there's this image of these different aspects, but it's a family?
Oh, I like
Wow.
that.
Yeah, I know we do talk about the Trinity at some point in the book, but what that makes me, first of all, that's awesome, Chris, and I really, it's been amazing to have IFS in my mind and revisit biblical passages and different stories and be understanding it in terms of parts. And some, Swedenborgian friends of mine, when I talk about IFS, they said, oh, this is how Swedenborg understands the Bible. They're all parts of you. Everybody in the Bible is a part of you. But I just wanted to say before passing it to Jonathan that Jonathan brings up a lot of biblical references throughout the book, which was a really great part of having him be part of these conversations. So there's some really interesting parallels, including the Trinity, that we explore in the book. So Jonathan, I don't know if you want to
Yes,
add
and
to that. Is your mic
getting
on?
into this and doing this book as can you hear me okay?
Okay, it is. Okay, great.
It's on. Did make me think about the Bible, the Old New Testament, in a different way. That these are all these pictures, like pictures in the New Testament, of the Lord interacting with groups of people, and this group is upset. This group this person gets healed, and these people are upset about it, and I thought, wow, anybody who's been around Swedenborg knows that concept that all these things are parts of one individual. Swedenborg repeats it many times, and yet to see that as, oh wait, this is the whole psychodrama.
Yeah.
There's a part of you that's upset about what's going on. And the Lord will kindly spend time with that part too, sort of like the father does in the prodigal son, going out to the other son and working with him for a while because he's upset, like it seems like the younger son's being treated better than he was. So I really like that spirit and that way of reading scripture kind of fascinatingly intersects with what we're talking about.
Yeah, and that's one of the key discoveries, I think, as Dick Schwartz calls it, that differentiates IFS from other parts work models, or even like inner child work and everything, is this recognition of self, that there is this undamageable inner core of you that is always there to convey those qualities if parts are willing to unblend. And so you really get a picture of that being like Jesus, you know, and Swedenborg says in, I think, Arcana Celestia 17:12, that the place where the Lord flows into us is the very thing that makes it seem as though it's ourselves. So you are extending love to a part of yourself and helping these, angry parts to give a little space. Let me be with the sad one for a little while. It's okay. You know, you're doing that, but it's really your connection to the divine inflow. So, Dawn, you had a question. Comment.
Excellent presentation. I think it's absolutely wonderful that in Providence there are all these things happening in different ways that can spread the Latin word, that it's just compared to any time in the past, we didn't have all these things, and to see develop things that will attract all different types of study is it's a wonderful thing. So thank you guys.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
I don't know if we emphasize it enough, but from my understanding, Bob Falconer is a very big deal in the whole IFS world. I think of him as sort of the number two. He's trained thousands of other therapists all over the world. And the fact that we see Swedenborg in his book already, you know, his previous book talks about Swedenborg. So we contact him. It turns out he's been reading this for years. I mean, that's the kind of thing that we've dreamed of at the Swedenborg Foundation for years. Finding somebody out there that's already doing something big in the world and wants to know more about Swedenborg and wants to connect with us. So this is an exciting moment to be involved in this book.
Yeah, very.
So at the beginning you were talking about how people in isolation, you might be missing the problem. I mean, it might be a family problem. And then pretty much everything we're talking about, it's the family within you as opposed, so like in your retreat, would that be something that people come to individually or that they come to as families?
That's a great question. One of the things that IFS, as they've come to understand it, and sort of one of their principles, is that the external system reflects the internal system. So it's really similar to how Swedenborg says the spiritual flows into the, you know, physical, like that's where the causes are. And so they're very mindful about, one, you can do work in your own system around something that's dysfunctional in your environment, and it could create a shift, even if those outer people aren't changing. But then also, they're very mindful that if your external system is in a critically, you know, unsafe or a difficult situation, then you don't want to go, like you need those protectors. Or, you know, like those protectors might still need to be doing their job even as they're developing a relationship with yourself. You know, so like the way that, you know, because the protective system develops in response to the external system. So a lot of our parts have internalized, you know, the beliefs of the, you know, like of our caretakers. And so there is a dynamic there, like you're saying, and one of the covers of the books that I flashed up on the screen at one point is a huge program that developed out of IFS that's called Intimacy from the Inside Out. So it's particularly IFS adapted to couples therapy. So to do work with couples, but with a mindfulness of these are two parts of a system in a marriage or a relationship, but then they are multiple. They have their parts that are, one thing that they say in IFS is parts evoke parts and self evokes self. So if like you have a part that's really reactive, that's gonna call a reactive part out of your, you know, out of other people around you. But if you are connected to your self energy, that actually creates this nonverbal, you know, energetic invitation for self energy to be present. So there's a sort of a both and, but the external environment reflects the internal environment.
And I
Yeah.
realized that there's something when I was first becoming familiar with this, the IFS idea kind of gave me a bit of a headache because mathematically it's already ridiculous with 8 billion people on the planet, and then if each of those have multiple parts, and they even talk in IFS that your parts have parts, and it just, the multiplicity was kind of dizzying to me. But part of the point of it is that there is this self with a capital S, which to me is actually the Lord in you. It's something divine that's present in you that makes one out of it. That's what the Lord does with the whole of the heavens, and that's what he does with all our crazy parts and thoughts and feelings, and so that makes it okay and provides for healing rather than just chaos.
Yes. Kim.
There's an interesting phenomenon in addiction recovery that is. I'm sorry. There's an interesting phenomenon in addiction recovery that highlights what you talked about today. When an addict hits bottom, surrenders, and gets sober, they've often spent a lot of time disassociated with their parts because they've been gone, right? And then they get sober and they find themselves very aware of these parts and they're screaming. And we used to call it the committee. And everyone, like you were saying, every one of these addicts in a room that's recovering, they all show up with their committee. And it's so interesting that one person will have committee members that's totally different from another person. But it's those parts that need healing that are most loud. And it made me think of that whole committee. And through the process of regeneration, or in AA we call it, working the steps, you uncover all of this and you heal a lot of it. And that, 6 and 7 is all about these character defects. Well, guess what the character defects are? They're little parts that are dysfunctional and need healing. So it's just fascinating that 90 years ago, when they wrote the Alcoholics Anonymous big book, that's in there. This whole thing about needing to identify these parts, and we talk about we can't heal these things. Yeah. It's God. It's God that heals these things. Right. And the whole way you described the vessels having to turn to the light, that's really what you do, is you recognize this character defect in yourself, this part that needs healing, and then you ask God to help you heal it. And that willingness to ask for that help is like turning that vessel, opening towards the light, so that then God can heal you from it. It's just fascinating talk. Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
So great. Thank you so much. That's amazing. I hadn't heard that term of describing like the committee. So and good. I don't know if I said it explicitly in the talk, but that the whole point in any kind of IFS therapy is just to invite parts to unblend, for self to be present, because they know that once self is present, healing happens. You don't have to know how to heal. It's not about the therapist doing something for the client. The client's own self knows how to heal the parts when it is made present, when there's enough space for it to be present. So that's sort of like, just let it surrender to that healing force.
And that first step of healing for the addict is just them waking up and going, what's all this chat? What is this? I have this committee. And just acknowledging that they've been out of touch with their parts just starts the healing. It's amazing. They start to make friends, like you said. They start to make friends with these people, these committee members in their head. And they start to talk to them. Like, no, I'm not. And often this is what relapse is about, is the people that are unwilling to deal with their parts. Yeah. The parts then take over, and it drives them back out.
Yeah, and in the book, you get a pretty good overview of more details about IFS that we didn't include in this talk, like how they understand different categories of parts in yourself that can be useful to understand.
And where addictions can can come from. Sometimes it
Yes.
can even be a protective mechanism of something else you don't want to deal with.
Right.
You know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's always. People need to hear you. Okay. And then, are we about at time, Chris? Or I don't. Yeah. Okay. Great.
So I was just wondering, it doesn't sound like you have to let's say you have some resentment or anger built up, and that's really like a stitch in your side or something. In this system, do you have to acknowledge the root cause of the problem? I mean, where that anger is, or forgive it? If it was like, say, somebody you're in a relationship with, or shame you're feeling, or does it just, you focus on the body part and then just that's what you focus on?
Yeah. So, what happens when you do focus on a part, like resentment or something, you're getting to know it. So, and again, as Kim said, like 90 years ago, the big book gets written, like parts are just the way our system works. And so it's actually incredibly intuitive. And it reminds me of how Swedenborg says, we all know the language of heaven, like spiritual language, we all have it. And we're like, what? How do you talk like an angel? It's gonna feel like the most normal thing. That's what I found with IFS. It just feels completely natural to have a part talk back to you. For you to say, what do you need me to know about this resentment? If you're just showing up with compassion, it's gonna tell you. You can't, other parts of you might wanna say, oh, I think I know. But really you're like, no, I'm gonna hear from the part. And the part, it might surprise you. Parts often surprise us. But so a part would be able to let you know, I just need you to do this. Or maybe that, no, there's this other part that really needs your attention. Can we bring some energy there, whatever. So you sort of can't predict it, but the amazing thing is parts know themselves and they're conversational. I mean, there can also be, nonverbal parts. Anyway, I don't want to simplify it too much, but.
And this is part of, I read that quote about having autonomy. That something I like about Bob Falconer's approach is that he treats all these things with respect and as that they have freedom. And you can, would you be willing to tell me why you're upset? And they may say, no. Say, okay. Well, I'm not going to talk in front of that. Oh, okay, well, maybe we can go talk this other part into leaving you alone for a little while, and then maybe it'll open up. But recognizing that there's an autonomy there.
Yeah. I think maybe we are at the end point of our time, and I want to just, thank you all for being here and coming to the Swedenborg Foundation's annual meeting and listening to our talk. And we have books for sale, plenty of copies of Opening the Inner World, all at a discount here tonight that you can purchase on your way out to cross the lawn and go to where we have a reception prepared with some drinks and refreshments and food and lovely company and conversation to keep the dialogue going. But again, swing by the table on your way out if you want to grab a copy of any of the books that we have available, which are also available on Amazon or our website if you want to get one later. So, yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.